Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and finally edited the video for one of the cards I did last month as a guest designer for MFT. So just getting through all the footage and getting it all edited. So I used the Safari Friend stamp set here, and I just have some craft cardstock in my little travel stamp platform, and I'm going to stamp all of the images from the set with VersaFine ONYX black ink. And I used my anti-static powder tool first because I want to clear heat emboss all these because I like that raised glossy edge, and plus I want to kind of watercolor these in. I'm going to use my oxides to color them in, and having the raised edge just means I can work a little faster and things are going to start bleeding into each other and making a mess. So after I coated these with the clear embossing powder, I melted all of them with my heat tool, and then I pulled out several different colors of Distress Oxide ink pads. I did a video. This was one of the first techniques I think I ever did when I first got the oxides like a year ago. And I still love how they look on craft. And I really like picking up the color with my little water brush and painting onto, darker color cardstock. So I kind of went back to that for this card. So I just smushed the corners of my Oxide ink pads onto my glass mat. And because I don't need very much, these are small images, you don't need a whole lot of ink. And then I'm just going to pick up the color with my little water brush and paint it on. Nothing fancy. I'm not going to do a whole lot of blending. I'm not using very much water because this is just craft cardstock. This isn't watercolor paper. If you overwork it, you'll end up like the cardstock will start to pill. If you start noticing little fibers coming away or little balls forming when you are, coloring on regular cardstock, that's pilling, and you don't want that. Once that happens, there's no going back. There's no way to fix it. It's done for because the cardstock itself is literally just starting to tear apart. I rarely have an issue though, because like I said, I don't try to overwork. Like if you try to keep going back and adding more water, adding more layers on regular cardstock, that's when you're going to have an issue. But I try to keep it as simple as possible just to minimize that so that it doesn't happen, and just add color and then move on. So that's what I did with all of these. I just added the color really quick and easy. And then I experimented. I was curious as to how this would work. In the end, it kind of didn't. But I pulled out my Hero Arts white pigment unicorn ink. And painting with that I've done before. That works just fine. And it looks cute on craft cardstock. So like I painted little hippo's teeth, which I love. And they're little toenails with the white. It's where I went. I used the white to add highlights. And at first it looks great. But as the ink starts to dry, it starts to kind of absorb into the oxides. So while it looks great as it dries, it just kind of disappears in the end. So I'll fix this at the end of the card. Like right now I was like, oh, this is working just fabulous. And then later I was like, oh no, it didn't work at all. So yeah, it kind of wasted my time doing all this, but it gave me some ideas because I added, little like splatters and speckles to the hippo, and you still see it at the end on the finished card. You see a little bit of texture I created, but the actual like bright white, no. So I did it anyway. And then after everything was dry, I die cut all of these little characters with their coordinating Die-Namics dies so that they are all die cut. And then I have a whole bunch of other dies to create a scene. So I die cut a piece of craft cardstock with the largest of the A2 stitched rectangle stacks set 2. I also die cut some green ITSY BITSY polka dot pattern paper. And I used one of the Grassy Hills Die-Namics. That's going to be my ground. And I adhered that to the craft cardstock there. I wanted that in place so that I could run this through with this wafer die from the Gift Shaker Window and Frames Die-Namics. So this is like the window die itself. It's going to cut those 4 squares right out for me. So I have those cut into my card front. I'm going to deal with that in a minute. To actually create the gift, I have 2 more pieces of craft cardstock, one of which I cut the frame from, and then another one that's just bigger than the openings. And both of these I'm going to paint with that Mermaid Lagoon Distress Oxide ink that I used on the little bird. I just love that, how the color looks on craft. Like Mermaid Lagoon on craft is just fabulous. Love it. And I did the little bird and I was like, I need to pull in more of this color. So I painted the frame, and then the background took a little bit longer because it's so much bigger. When my ink became more water on my craft mat, that's when I smushed in more ink so I could quickly finish painting that background. And then I dried both these just real quick with my heat tool just so that they were dry. And now I can start creating the actual shaker element. So I have the gift shaker pouches, and I'm going to put just some multimedia matte adhesive on the back side of my card front here so I can adhere the pouches. You could use score tape. I ended up using so many different types of adhesive because I was all over the place making this card. I think I used like 6 different types of adhesive. You could definitely use like what I'm using right here, this 1/8" score tape. That would have worked perfectly. Everything with me sometimes is just an afterthought. In this card, everything was like, oh, I should have done such and such. And I don't have time to go back and redo everything, refilm everything. So yeah, 1/8" score tape were great. But then I was like, I wanted wider score tape because this is the perfect size to fit around the perimeter of all of the shaker pouches. So it's great. I highly recommend it. If you don't have some 1/8" score tape in your stash, you should have some because it works great too for when you're assembling little boxes, anything with little flaps, small areas. Awesome stuff. So I used it and it was great for the centers, but then I ended up pulling off the backing and using 1/2" score tape around the perimeter of this so that I have more room to really adhere the background piece that I'd painted there, and it seals everything. It seals the pouch to the card front. It's going to seal the back to this. So yeah, the 1/2", put that around, let that sit while I filled all these pouches. And I'm using this is the Sunny sequence mix or Sunny Days sequence from Pretty Pink Posh. The colors just happen to go really well. There's like, some turquoisey colors and yellows and green and white. So I really filled these pouches. I wanted them to be pretty full since I didn't want a whole lot of like them sitting on the bottom. I wanted these full. And I also pulled out some Studio Caudia chunky glitter and just kind of scooped a bunch of that in there too. If you want everything to shake really freely in the pouches, you can use an anti-static powder tool or a dryer sheet, and that'll keep everything from like really clinging to the plastic. I don't mind most of the time if it does that. I like the look of it. But if it does bother you, do that first, then fill everything with whatever you're, shaking around. And then after I filled everything, I peel off the backing of that adhesive, and now I can press this piece into place, and that seals everything into those pouches, and that's just, now nothing's going to move. Like you could use anything. You could use little seed beads, glitter like I showed. Once it's sealed, it's good. So I've got my shaker element, and now I just need to start adhering everything to, create my little scene that I had going in my head. So I adhered the frame with little narrow derice foam strips, and then I die cut the ribbon, I guess you'd call it, with the dies that come with the gift shaker window and frame dynamics. And I die cut that from one of the kind of turquoisey color pattern papers from the MFT ITSY BITSY polka dots pack. And I also die cut the little bow from that as well. And I'm going to pop that on the top. And then there's a little tiny square die in the set that's the little center for the bow, just so you can add more dimension. So I pop the bow into place, and then I'm going to pop the center on top of that with a little bit of foam adhesive. And then same thing with all these little characters. I thought it would be cute to have, what are technically supposed to be, great big African jungle creatures, spreader safari creatures, around this, what would be essentially an enormous gift. So I thought that would just look really cute. So I'm popping all of them up with layers of foam tape and whatnot. And then decided, just because I had these little leaves stamped and colored already, I just kind of stuck them onto the gift just cause. So got all of those into place. And then for my sentiments, I have 2 strips of a dark gray cardstock, and I am going to stamp sentiments from the Safari Friends stamp set onto that with some clear embossing ink. And then I'm going to use a detail white embossing powder to emboss both of these sentiments. So once I have both of these coated with the white embossing powder, I can then melt them with my heat tool. And I'm just doing both at once because one sentiment is going to go on the inside of the card, the other one's for the outside. So melt both of these with my heat tool. And then the one for the front of the card, it says Huge Birthday Wishes. I didn't really have anywhere to put it, just because I filled up the whole card with characters and gift shakers, and I've got that line sitting on top of the gift. So I just used my scissors to snip all 3 words apart, and then I'm going to adhere those to the card front with more foam tape. Just pop them up just to give it, again, more dimension. This card is all out dimension fun. So got those into place. And then I'm going to adhere that to my card base with that 1/2" score tape, since it was sitting right beside me. So, and also because like with the shaker and all the elements and everything else, it kind of makes it for a heavier card front. So I like using a really strong adhesive. So I'm going to adhere that to my card base, which is heavyweight white cardstock cut to 4 1/4 by 11, and it was scored at 5 1/2. So this will be an A2 size card, so 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And then for the inside of the card, I had more green polka dot paper that I die cut with the same Grassy Hills die. And I'm just going to adhere that to the inside of the card with my little Xyron tape runner. And then I'll just flip this over and trim off the pieces hanging over the edges with my scissors. And then I can adhere my sentiment, and I had saved the little elephant for the inside because there wasn't really anywhere to put him on the outside of the card. Plus, I thought he would just look cute and go really well with the sentiment on the inside where it says wishing you a ton of fun. So I adhered those into place with my little tape runner. And this is when I decided to pull out my white gel pen and add the highlights that way, just to really make things pop a lot more. So I just went over all the highlights I had already done earlier with the white pigment ink and just added all those back in with the gel pen, and then added, you know, a few more dots onto the little hippo and the bird and whatnot. And then once I'd done that, I also decided to add a few little dots and whatnot just to the craft cardstock background, just to kind of tie it all in together, since I've got, you know, little dots and polka dots going on everywhere. So added all my little highlights, gonna go in, add a few little dots here and there to the background, and then I also added a few little highlights to the gift. Just like I said in my last video, people asking if I'll do a separate video on like how to add highlights. I'm thinking about it. It's not something I really think about. Like I said in the last video, I just do it. I don't really think about it, and I don't follow any rules. I'm like, oh, I could add a couple dots here. Oh, I'll add a line as a highlight here. And I don't really put a whole lot of thought into it. So I remembered to do this on the little elephant on the inside as well, just to finish him off. So I added some dots and some little lines, and that's going to finish off this little card. So I've got this fun little safari shaker card. You can hear the little shaker elements inside the pouch. So really fun. Just, yeah, they're just fun. So as always, I will have links below the video to my blog post. I'll have a supply list, links to everything I use, so you can check that out below in the description box as well as on my blog. Thank you all so much for watching and subscribing and thumbs upping and commenting on my videos, and I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye!